Blood rushed to my ears as the door slammed shut, and my mother's voice cracked like glass. "You'll never amount to anything, Leela. This is a joke." In that instant, I realized the only thing more painful than their ridicule would be the silence of a life never lived. Years later, after my research was stolen and my name erased from every paper, I stood in a cracked lot behind the abandoned grocery store on 12th Street, cradling a handful of soil teeming with rare seedlings. The city called it a wasteland. I called it a canvas. I had been told I was an embarrassment, a dreamer who would ruin the family's name. I left that night, heart pounding, the weight of their words pressing against my ribs like a stone. I walked away from the lecture hall, the lab, the expectations, and I promised myself that I would turn those wastelands into medicine for a world that had forgotten how to heal. I quit my teaching assistantship, sold my laptop, and took a night shift at the hardware store to fund my seedlings. Every sunrise found me kneeling in the concrete, coaxing life from rusted pipes and broken sidewalks. I built raised beds from reclaimed wood, installed drip irrigation from discarded bottles, and whispered to each seed as if they were my own children. The ridicule followed me like a shadow, but I let it fuel the fire. Winter came and the frost killed half my basil, but I learned to layer mulch and protect the vulnerable shoots. Summer brought a heat wave that wilted my first batch of echinacea. I improvised shade cloths from old tarps. A local news crew visited, skeptical, and filmed me harvesting a single, bright leaf of the endangered St. John's wort. When they asked why I risked everything, I answered, "Because the future needs these plants more than it needs my reputation." The city council eventually offered a grant after a petition gathered 3,000 signatures, and the university that had discredited me sent a delegation to see the transformation. Within 3 years, what was once a barren lot became a thriving ecosystem of 45 medicinal species, supplying raw compounds to pharmaceutical firms and restoring soil health in neighborhoods that had been food deserts. When I finally drove the familiar gravel road back to my childhood home, the porch light was on, and my siblings stood in the doorway, eyes wide. My mother clutched a photo of me as a child, her hands trembling. I stepped onto the cracked steps, the scent of lavender and rosemary rising from the garden that now surrounded the house. "Look at this," I said, gesturing to the rows of thriving plants, "the very medicines you once called a joke." Their faces shifted from disbelief to awe as I explained how the compounds from the urban garden had been used to create a new anti-inflammatory drug that saved a child in the hospital last month. My father, who had once called me a waste of time, stared at the thriving tomatoes and whispered, "I'm sorry." The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the weight of years of dismissal finally lifted. In that moment, I understood that the true harvest was not the plants themselves, but the lesson that perseverance plants deeper roots than criticism ever can. My family learned that the greatest embarrassment is not dreaming, but refusing to nurture that dream. And as the sun set behind the rooftops, I felt the quiet triumph of a heart that had turned scorn into salvation. I turned the key in the old lock, stepped inside, and let the scent of fresh soil remind me that every seed I planted was a promise kept, a reminder that the greatest revenge is the quiet bloom of a life reclaimed.